on YouTube. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to Wellness Coach. My name is Stefan Ravalli. I'm a host here at Wellness Coach and also the host of the Serve Conscious podcast and a meditation mindfulness teacher. And I'm joined today by Andy Lee, and we're going to talk about mindful leadership. It's the third installment of our series. We are now going to be talking about building trust, and I'm so excited to tap into his expertise once again. Hello, Andy. Good to see you. How are you today?
Hey, Stefan, doing great. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. So, before we begin, I'm just going to remind everyone to take advantage of the interactive features of this discussion. Use the chat box, use the Q&A box, put up your hand so we can enable your mic and you can talk directly to us. And just a reminder that although we're so happy to see you on YouTube, we're unfortunately unable to communicate with you like this. You have to download the app from the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store in order to use these interactive features. All right. So, Andy, shall I pass things over to you if you'd like to settle us into today's topic with a meditation practice?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Stefan. So let's take a posture that's conducive to mindfulness practice, putting both feet flat on the floor, allowing the posture to be alert, to be upright, but also relaxed, letting the shoulders be relaxed and letting the hands just fall into the lap wherever they're comfortable. And when you're ready, simply allowing your eyes to close or to look downward with a soft gaze. And just taking a moment to appreciate what it feels like to pause in the middle of a busy day. Noticing the state of mind, noticing what thoughts are rattling around, and noticing the fact that you're breathing, and bringing your awareness to the sensations of the breath as it moves in and out of the body. Not needing to change it in any way, just observing the natural flow of the breath. And simply being aware of what it feels like to breathe in and being aware of what it feels like to breathe out. And knowing that right now there's nothing else that has to happen. Just resting in awareness of the breathing body. And following 3 more cycles of the breath in and out of the body. Seeing if we can be fully present with each breath from the beginning of the in-breath to the end of the out-breath. And when you're ready, allowing your eyes to open again. And if you want to, just letting your body just stretch or twist any way that feels good right now. I always add that, Stefan, but I think that's mostly for me. Though I think everybody gets something out of it if they do it.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, bringing in the physical component of these practices is vital. So much of us think meditation's in the mind, but our bodily health and nimbleness is just as important as our mental nimbleness, I found.
Of course, absolutely. Yep.
Mhm. And yeah, sitting in a chair all day, that's always the antidote. I don't move enough, I don't think sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, so guys, let us know if anything came up in that practice you'd like more clarity on. Leave your questions in the chat box, in the Q&A box, and anytime during this discussion, please do so because this is an interactive panel and it is elevated by anything you contribute. But I'll start by kicking off today's topic. I'd like to know what a culture of trust looks like in terms of mindful leadership, building off of what we've previously talked about in our last session, which was presence
Yeah.
in mindful leadership. What is trust now developing?
Mm-hmm. So in the last session, we talked about presence as table stakes for leadership. And presence is really, I mean, if you think about, you know, the leader running a staff meeting, that let's just imagine that that's the situation we're talking about. Um, Presence is the quality of a leader that indicates that they are paying attention and tuned in, that they're actually listening to what people are saying, actively engaged, and paying full attention to what's going on right here and right now. And as we know, that's not always a given because these days, first off, many times we're virtual, we're not in a meeting. Secondly, people bring computers to meetings. Thirdly, there are all kinds of other things going on. So that's table stakes. You need to do that as a leader to be fully tuned in with your team, whether it's in a team meeting or otherwise, but we'll just stick with that example. Trust is about what happens once that awareness is there. How do you work with that? And how do you take the next step, which is to create an environment where people can learn and grow and share information that's going to help everybody to succeed. So that's really what we're talking about in terms of trust is, normally we think of trust as something between two people. You know, if I ask you to do something, can I trust you to follow through? What we're talking about here is actually a little bit different. It's kind of that feeling you get in a team where people have your back, where you can talk about things that are uncomfortable, and nobody's going to throw you under the bus. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about trust at a team level.
All right. So this might shift some people's understanding of the top-down leadership model because, a lot of us think about ourselves as employees as the one that needs to be trusted,
Right.
not ourselves as the source of trust that's going to benefit the team. How does the whole work culture benefit when, you know, leaders are the ones seeking to be trusted?
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes back to what we talked about last time. I think we probably talked about it on both podcasts, Stefan, which is kind of turning that organizational structure upside down. And you had mentioned earlier this idea of servant leadership, where the role of a leader really is not to be an exceptional person themselves. The role of a leader is to help their team or all the people that work for them to be exceptional. Okay. And so it's up to them, up to a leader to do what they can to create an environment that will help everybody to do that. And so what a leader needs to ask him or herself is, what can I do so that the people that work for me or that I support trust me? And what can I do to help cultivate a sense of trust among my team members? It's a different way of thinking about the leader's role, as you said. But what it can do is it can really unleash a lot of effectiveness, a lot of much better performance across teams, although it sometimes doesn't look like that. So, Stefan, if I can tell you a brief story um, that one of the researchers in this area, actually the primary researcher, Amy Edmondson, observed. Is that okay?
Of course, please. Yeah,
Okay.
I was just about to ask you about like working models
Okay.
of this and the
Right.
change it's created because I'm so interested. But please,
Right.
that's
Well, so Amy Edmondson did some research early in her career, and she had a group of nurses, okay, teams of nurses that she knew how effective they were. She knew the quality of their work and the outcomes. And some nurse teams were, more effective than others. And then when she went to their meetings and documented their processes, she found something very surprising. She found that the most effective nurse teams were talking about more mistakes. They were talking about mistakes more. They were reporting issues more than the teams that were less effective. And first she thought there was something really wrong with the research she was doing. But as it happens, what happens is the most effective teams were bringing up issues and bringing them up early and solving those issues as a team. And that's really what was driving their effectiveness. So it may look like people are talking about, uncomfortable things or difficult things, but as a matter of fact, that's what you want to see. You want to see teams putting their heads together to solve things and to be comfortable talking about that kind of stuff.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. I mean, if you're not talking about a problem, it can't be solved. But what do leaders do that make their team not want to talk about problems? What do they do to get in the way of this trust when that seems like a really simple imperative?
That's a really good question. A lot of times people are afraid to talk up in front of their leaders. And because they're afraid, they want to look good. Number one, you just want to look good. And I think this always survives to some extent. When somebody makes a presentation to their boss or their boss's boss, they're going to say, they're going to frame things in a very positive way. And any issue they bring up, they're going to have a solution for. So that's kind of natural. These are the people that are going to be paying you know, giving us our paycheck, considering us for raises. We don't want to go in with a lot of problems. We want to go in with a lot of solutions. That's the first thing. The second thing is that leaders can almost unconsciously say, well, that's terrible. How did you let that happen? What's going on with that? Just kind of drilling in on that person. And there's really nothing wrong with that. I mean, it can be justified, but a more effective way you want to do that in a way that encourages people to come back and do it again, to bring up issues, even if they don't necessarily, if they don't reflect perfectly on them, that they're comfortable enough to bring it up. And as a leader, you have to create that space. You have to be able to let people talk about things that are difficult without reprimanding them, and without negative repercussions.
All right. And everyone, I got a question for you to this note. What gets in the way of trust in your workplace? Whether you're a leader, what disrupts your team trusting you? Or if you are, a member of a team, what gets in the way of you trusting your leader? What kind of behaviors, what kind of precedents being set? Got a question in the Q&A box here. What if my boss is too arrogant and self-serving?
Well, unfortunately, there's not much someone can do to change the nature of their boss. Um, so I don't know if there's anything that can be done necessarily about that. But one thing you might want to do is work with some of your other team members to create a sense of safety and trust among a subgroup, and then perhaps work through problems and then bring the solutions to your manager and say, look, this is what we did. We talked about this openly together and we came up with a solution. And perhaps in that way, showing how a different kind of approach can work. Another thing that I find really helpful is kind of on the more political side, but it's related to mindfulness, because mindfulness is about, everyone having a sense of humility. And what I find is that if you can solve a problem and give your boss the credit for it, that's a good way to get almost anyone on board, and if you can find a way to have a discussion about a problem and come up with an answer and make the boss feel that they enabled you to do that, that may warm them up to the idea of open dialogue and coming up with solutions as a team.
Absolutely. Some might consider this to be like kind of Machiavellian and manipulative, but actually in Buddhism, I believe it's known as the passing of merit. And
Oh
it's a way
yeah.
of
Oh,
getting
yeah.
out of your own ego, right?
And I think that's just something to live by. I mean, the more you can give away credit, the more you can make other people look good, the easier your work and your life is going to be, and the better your organization is going to do.
Definitely, definitely. And I'll speak to my own experience with leadership, having worked somewhere where there was like a culture of trust, like a certain amount of sense that our leader had our back. But then they moved up, they put someone else in their place who became really reactive every
Mm,
time we brought a problem. They were blamers. Like a problem comes to them, and the first thing they say is, "What did you do wrong to make this happen?" And
right.
everyone shrunk. And now they stopped bringing problems to the manager.
Yep.
And it was such an
Yep.
amazing shift really quick to see
Yeah.
that.
That's too bad.
Mhm. But anyway, we've got another question here. Red flags. What red flags should we be aware of in bad leadership? That's from an anonymous attendee in the Q&A box.
Hmm. Well, I mean, in the context of what we're talking about, which is that, in mindful leadership, and I think this is true for all leaders, but I just want to couch it that way because there are other ways to think about leadership. Um, a leader should really be trying to make everybody else look good. I mean, this is a universal principle that works. And one of the things that could be a red flag is someone who takes credit for other people's work. Um, and another thing could be someone, as Stefan was talking about, who's punitive, who, when somebody makes a mistake, they the outcomes are bad. We don't talk about, okay, how can we do this better next time, or what have we learned, which would be constructive responses. But you screwed up, and this is going to haunt you. That would be an unconstructive response. So we're looking for a sense of generosity of spirit, and a sense of openness, and a sense of looking towards the future. It's important to learn from the past, but learning from the past should always be in the service of getting it right the next time, doing it better the next time. And to me, that's really the mark of a great leader.
I think so too. Yeah. And another question about not great leaders. That's the follow-up question about the arrogant boss. What if we do attempt to, use these practices you're talking about to warm them up a bit? What if that still doesn't work? He said he or she said I should probably find a better place. Then there's an emoticon of someone running away.
Well, we constantly have to look at our environment and ask ourselves, through our mindfulness practice, this helps us to do this. When we stop for a moment in the middle of the day and we notice, I'm feeling very, very stressed, or I'm feeling very low energy today. And noticing what situations bring that up. And if it's situations that aren't going to be changing, about perhaps the culture of the organization or who your boss is, then you have to make a discerning choice and make a decision. It's not always up to, there's no way actually that we can count on changing anyone's behavior but our own. And sometimes that means that we need to change our environment. And hopefully, mindfulness practice also helps us to do that, not only to improve things when we can, but to notice when there are things that we can't change and to act accordingly.
Yeah, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. That is a question we still need to ask ourselves, even though, I teach people to be able to be resilient in any work environment. But that also means being aware of like when somewhere isn't serving your needs, your goals, and to, understand your freedom to pursue those too.
Yep, absolutely.
And I guess a good leader knows that, shouldn't take their team for granted, and knowing that they could lose them potentially if they don't serve their needs as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I worked for an organization once where a large corporation, and they had a model, or the head of HR talked about leaders in two categories. There are, quote, net producers of talent. Okay. These are people that everybody wanted to work for. And when they worked for this person, then they got better. And when they got better, they got promoted out of that organization to lead something else. Okay. And then there are net consumers of talent. And these are the people where, good talent goes to shrivel away and to stay, but not to thrive. And that's really, if you want to be a good leader over the long term, it's really helpful for you to have a reputation for supporting people, for bringing out the best in people. Because if you want to hire the best and keep the best, that's really the way to do it.
Definitely. I've got a question in the Q&A box here. Another anonymous one. I'm a leader at my work and I want my team to know they can trust me, but
Mm,
I'm not sure how to make that happen. How do
mm.
they start?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking that. Um, One of the things that it is always a good idea is to look at ourselves first, and this is what you're doing. So I applaud the question. Um, a great place to start is as a role model. Okay, and you have to judge. I'm giving you some thoughts here and some ideas, but I'm not saying that this is going to work across the board for everyone. You have to use your own judgment. But as much as you can, if it makes sense, to show what it's like to to make yourself, quote, vulnerable. There's a very famous researcher and also TED talk by Brene Brown about vulnerability, um, and how important that is and how powerful that is as a leader. So if you can be upfront about what you do well, but also kind of be upfront about perhaps something that didn't go so well and what you did to fix it, or if you can go to your team and say, I need your help with something, okay? Come to them with a sense of humility and a sense of vulnerability that's kind of carefully graded so you don't go over the top. That's a great way to set the tone.
Yeah, and actually, we were talking before we officially began here about the feeling of safety. When you're, a member of a team, you want to feel safe in that team. You want to feel secure. You'll do your best work then. And I guess leaders have that in mind, whether or not they're mindful, whether or not they're seeking to be trusted. They still want their team to to feel safe, to feel like they can somehow trust them to at least perform and lead them. And so, can like, what would you say to a manager or leader who's worried that being vulnerable will compromise their team's trust in them because they have to look infinitely capable?
I think that's a misperception. Honestly, I don't think team members expect their bosses to be infinitely capable. Um, Anyone who's a leader knows that the people that work for you know a lot more about the details of what's going on than you do, or they should. Um, so, the ability of a leader to be all knowing and to know exactly what to do is severely limited. So, I think that you need to feel comfortable. Um, there's a number of different ways to approach it, but I'm kind of losing the track here. Where were we going with this?
Oh, how
The
can
beauty
we?
of live broadcast, right?
I know it's great. There's vulnerability happening. It's like, oh no. Now we can be. Now we're even more relatable, as
There
we
you
fumble
go.
and find our way.
There you go.
Yeah, it was just a question about vulnerability and, leaders that might be afraid to show it because
Right.
they don't want their team to lose faith in them,
Thank you.
in terms of their capability to lead.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think that you should be afraid of being seen as less than perfect. However, you want to measure this, how much vulnerability you offer. And what I would do is definitely talk about, work related things, about things that are very objective and very task related in terms of, this is the situation I find myself in. Can you help me with this, for instance? I need somebody to fill in. I need some expertise. I need you guys to step up because this isn't going so well. To be very upfront and candid. That's really what people look for from their boss. They're looking for, and we all know this, we're looking for someone who tells us the truth, who tells us the way it is, and doesn't try to constantly spin things and avoid talking about the reality. That's really the most important thing I think that people look for from their leaders.
I guess that makes total sense too. I mean, we're going to trust someone if they're providing the truth rather
Yes,
than a false veneer, and people can usually smell that eventually, right?
yes, I think so.
Yeah, I've got, by the way, we're just a bit past the 20-minute mark, so anyone that's got to go, definitely be on your way. We've already covered a lot, but there's another question here from Ashley that I'll throw at you if you've still got some time today, if we don't mind going over a bit.
No.
Um, what are some other resources, books, articles that you would recommend as part of instilling trust and becoming a more mindful, empathic leader? Thanks, Ashley.
Great question. There is actually a book by Amy Edmondson, who is the researcher in this area called psychological safety, which is really what we've been talking about in terms of team trust. And it's called The Fearless Organization. It's a very practical book, and there's a lot of great research in it, descriptions of research and descriptions of real case studies. that can give a lot of information on how to create this sense on a team.
All right, perfect. Amy Edmondson, I think our moderator, Kara, might be able to pull that up and put it in the chat box in our few remaining minutes there. If anyone wants to click on a link to that, that's helpful. And you can also check out the replay on YouTube if you want to back reference anything we've talked about today. So I guess we're there. We got just a few minutes left now, maybe 5 or so. If you'd want to do a meditation or leave any final thoughts about this topic with everyone before you send them off into the world.
Yeah, why don't we just do a brief reflection, if you will, with me on this topic, and just again taking a grounded and balanced posture, allowing your eyes to close, and just reflecting back on one time when you were working on a team that felt like there was a great deal of trust there, a great deal of sharing, and also a great deal of vulnerability, and also accountability and effectiveness. And just tapping into that sensation, what it felt like to be part of that team. Just reflecting on what it feels like to be part of a team where there's a sense of trust and psychological safety. And perhaps asking yourself, well, what can you do to help to create that feeling on your team? What's one small step that you can take today or in the near future that can help people to experience that sense? And when you're ready, allowing your eyes to open, perhaps jotting down a quick note. And on that note, any other questions come in, Stefan? Are we good?
No, I think that's everything. Yeah. Thanks so
Okay.
much for that, Andy.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to everybody who joined us today. We're really enjoying these sessions. I hope you're listening to the course also on Meditation Live, and I'm really looking forward to our next session, which is going to be about connection.
Me as well. Thank you again.
Okay, take care.